Hello, welcome back to 123 Java. I want to just do a quick video on infinite loops. I realized I just made a tutorial about for loops and while loops, and I didn't really touch on infinite loops, which are actually a very common bug in looping, especially while loops. So I wanted to create this video kind of as an addendum to the last one. So if you are still not sure about for loops and while loops, definitely check out my last one, number 3, and then this video should make more sense. So infinite loops typically result as usually as some kind of bug. Typically you've written a line wrong, you forgot to update something. There are some cases where you would desire an infinite loop, especially when dealing with like web servers, for example. Sometimes you want to constantly be checking on something, but for the most part, especially in beginner programming, these loops are the result of some bug. So let me show you what one might look like and why it will happen. So I would definitely say that infinite loops are mainly seen in while loops. There's like 1 or 2 examples of a for loop that would cause one, but I think definitely when this happens, you will see it in a while loop. So let's talk about that. So in the last video, we discussed how the way in which a while loop and a for loop differ are by, in a for loop, you have to give it a parameter that tells it exactly how many times that loop is going to be run. For a while loop, though, you don't. You just have to give it some kind of Boolean in here. And the reason an infinite loop might happen is because it might be checking that the Boolean in here is true, and that Boolean is always true. So you're never updating it to being false. You're never changing it. So this is always a true condition, and it's always going to execute this code. So an example would be, let's create, let's create some Boolean b that is true. And then let's say while b, which essentially, while b just means while b equals true. It's just a different way to format. There we go. So while b equals true, let's tell it to print the word loop. All right, so let's go ahead and run this, see what happens. So as you can see, this is like constantly running. It's not really ever going to terminate. It might be hard to tell, but this is kind of twitching right here. That's because this word is being printed over and over and over and over and over, and it's never stopping. And then you can tell up here that my program is still running because it's not terminated. So let me go ahead and terminate that because it will go on forever. Sometimes you might even reach an error message where it says you like exhausted the stack space on your computer or something like that. So that's one way that can happen. I would say though, for the most part, while loops result as they usually come from Booleans that have to do with numbers and, you know, greater than or equal to or something like that. So an example would be, let's say you have an integer called number and it starts at 0. And let's say we want to make a while loop that increments this number 0 from 0 to 10 and prints out that number each time. So we're essentially just counting to 10. So we want to have it be while number is smaller than 10. This code is going to happen. And let's say it's going to print the number with each iteration. So we have that. And then like here is a common mistake that might happen. So while number is smaller than 10, what we really want to do is we want to integrate, we want to update 0 to give it +1 each time until it reaches 10, and that way this loop will stop. But a common error would be something like number minus minus, which subtracts 1 every time from 0. So as you can see, you start at 0, then you'll go to -1, then -2, then -3, then -4. And this will never stop because it's just checking that the number is smaller than 10. Well, it's always going to be smaller than 10 because you're going into the negatives. And it's never, this condition is always going to be true, and this is always going to execute. So let's say, in theory, if we wanted this loop to end, once this loop ends, we want to say done counting. So now let's try running this. So as you can see, it's going on forever, like deep down into the negatives. And so we're going to terminate that. And this done counting command is never going to happen because this loop is never going to end. So it's never going to exit out of this while loop. So that's just one example of a very common bug, and you just want to make sure that as soon as you see an infinite loop happening, you just want to terminate that and make sure you're not slowing down your computer. Sometimes it can be tricky though, because sometimes if you don't have print statements, like say you're just internally subtracting one from number each time, you're not actually printing, it can be hard to actually see that the infinite loop is happening. So when I run this, it's harder to tell because you don't see like all these crazy numbers, but you can kind of see like my mouse starts dragging, and then you'll just see that when you go to the console, the console will tell you terminate, which means the program has never actually terminated. So it's just going on forever again. So that can be hard to tell sometimes, but if your program is just acting really funny and you have no idea why, and it like won't ever stop running and everything's behaving really slowly, it's probably because there's an infinite loop in there. So definitely check your while loops especially, and just realize it has something to do with this condition, and this condition is never being false. So then you want to check the inside of this loop, and you're probably going to realize that you wrongly updated something, or you forgot to make something no longer true anymore. So that's the basic of that. Hope that helps, and thank you for watching.